Alec and Jenny enjoy a good laugh at work, though Alec's noticed Jenny has been distant and distracted lately. His gut is telling him something's going on. We want Alec to trust his gut, reach out to Jenny and start a conversation. Alec's a bit worried he could say the wrong thing, but he can feel confident if he follows Are You OK's 4 conversation steps. Ask, are you okay? Alec should pick a comfortable, quiet place and the right time to ask Jenny how everything's going. He can mention his concern and the changes he's noticed. Alec should listen instead of trying to immediately fix Jenny's problems. Encourage action. Alec can help Jenny think of steps she can take to manage her situation, such as chatting to friends or family, a GP or other professional support, such as an employee assistance program. Alec should check in a few days later and let Jenny know he's been thinking of her and wants to know how she's been going. If Jenny's not ready to chat to him, he can encourage her to open up to someone she trusts. If you're worried about a workmate, reach out and start a conversation using the 4 steps. Ask, listen, encourage action, and check in. Alec can make a difference, and so can you. Are you okay?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Are You OK Day presentation. Before we start, I just wanted to make acknowledgement that in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea and community where we live and work. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders of people today. Before we start, and I introduce Tynan, who's also on the screen, I sent out a bit of comms this morning about our mental health first aiders. We have them scattered all around Australia and we need some more. There's a QR code up on the screen. Please provide your expression of interest, seek approval firstly from your line manager and let us know if you're interested in doing the 2-day course. Vanessa and I wanted to actually give a really quick shout out to all the managers who have brought their staff together today. The well-being of their employees is their first objective, and even though this is one day, we acknowledge the conversations that need to be had. Their commitment is ongoing to continually talking about mental health in the workplace. So thank you, everyone, and continue to ask the question. My last point today is it can be a heavy day for many of us, whether you have experienced any unrest with yourself, peers or friends. So taking care of yourself and self-care is important. ABB offer a free of charge employee assistant program through Workplace Options. You can reach out to them on the phone and they will call you back, or you could go to their website using our password ABB. If you have any questions or concerns after this presentation, please reach out to one of your first aid mental health workers, Vanessa or myself. Tynan, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you're busy.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to join, and I love when organisations do this. And like you mentioned, it's one day, but it doesn't have to just be one day. These conversations can happen all the time. Look, before we start, I'd like to pay my respects to and acknowledge those people with a lived experience of suicide, and really just pay my respects for their strength and their courage. Everyone's lived experience is unique. Everyone's lived experience is valuable, and everyone's lived experience can make a difference. Now, as I start today, I start by thinking I love the notion that sometimes in life, we're in the right place at the right time. And sometimes when we're in the right place at the right time, we might start thinking about other people and this thing I like to call premature problems. And that's when we go to an event and we see someone speak or we hear a message. And instead of taking it on board for ourselves, we're busy thinking, oh, that'd be a really good message for Barry to hear or for Phil. And we miss the point for ourselves. So today I've got a message that is for you and for all of you. And we are a little bit all over the place. I'm in Cairns, North Queensland, and there's people all over the country. But today I've got 2 stories and 2 messages that are centered around puzzles and creating pictures in life, because the way I look at life is very much like a puzzle. And for the last 7 years, I've been involved in the world of suicide prevention, and I've been blessed to have many opportunities and meet many amazing people and share some pretty amazing conversations. I see conversations as being a really, really powerful tool and something that I've always respected and appreciated the value that we can have through a conversation. And within the world of suicide prevention, we believe that most suicides are actually preventable. And it's a really nice thing to be able to have that belief that we go forward. But there was a time in my life when my narrative on life was very different. There was a time in my life when the pieces of the puzzle that I had created, they didn't fit together, and I had a pretty rough time trying to figure out how to put them all back together. 20 years ago, when I was 19 years of age, I arrived at a job site in the south of Brisbane, and I was taken to the third floor of a construction site and given a pretty simple task of sweeping plaster joints. As I started to do that, I stepped back and I fell. I fell 3 stories or 5.5 meters down the empty stairwell, landing on concrete. And what happened then was my memory was erased, and the puzzle and the picture of who I was, it had been pulled apart in a monumental way. When I woke up from a coma some 3 or 4 days later, it was the beginning of something which was introduced to me as recovery. And recovery was positioned to me and sold to me as something that was really positive and something that I should look forward to. But, you know, to be honest with you all, as I continued towards recovery and recovery got more clearer about what recovery was, the picture that recovery was to me was one that basically resembled a horror story. And recovery felt like something that I didn't want a part of. I did not want to get to recovery. And what recovery did with my mindset was it actually shifted things in my mind to a place where I truly believed that I should have actually died when I had the accident, and some injustice had happened along the way. And me being alive was, well, it was actually a mistake. Now, I love life and I love talking to people, and I've been able to have conversations and share some beautiful stories with people. So in my life, I figured that I've interacted and passed by probably around 1,302,406 people. I've shared conversations with around 12,817 people. I've truly connected with people I've truly connected with around 2,300 people, and I've cried and hugged probably close to 1,807 people. And what I can tell you from those interactions, it might shock you that the 140 people who are online and myself, we all share something very similar. We have thoughts and we have dreams, and the space in between our thoughts and our dreams, it's sometimes filled with things that we make up. And what I filled my space with between what I knew and what I was pictured towards me and what my puzzle created was, like I said, it was a horror story. It created a future that I was happy to let go past without being involved in it. It created a future that the more I thought about it, the more disconnected I came from that picture, and the more those thoughts about something had gone wrong and that I should have died, the more that solidified in my mind. Now, we all have pieces of our puzzle that can consume us and keep us awake. And I did. Those pieces of my puzzle that were around recovery, they were with me all the time. And I had a position where I thought they would never leave me. And I'm sure that some of you online can probably relate to thoughts that consume us and thoughts that we hold on to. The thing is, I am now a dad, and I love being a dad. And one of the things that I started doing early on with my son was putting puzzles together. And sometimes when we first started, we'd do it together. And then as he grew a bit older, I'd let him do it by himself. And as he's grown older, the puzzles have grown a little bit more complex. And when he starts to do it on his own, sometimes it goes great. And sometimes the puzzle results in tears and frustration and tantrums. But what happens then is I come in and I'll say, hey, mate, do you want to do it together? Maybe we can fit that part over there and we can start to construct the puzzle. Now, as I mentioned before, I have a message for you who's listening and thinking that, hey, that relates to me. The person out there who's wanted to speak up, that you haven't known how to or who to, and you haven't known what to do. You know what I mean? We get those times in life. Well, that was me. I had a long period of my life where I was screaming in silence, and where I put my broken wrist into a fan and I put my brain damaged head into a wall. Then one day, I couldn't scream inside anymore. I couldn't hold on to the internal narrative that basically said I wasn't enough, that said I was a burden on society. I couldn't keep going on like that. And the honest truth is that I was right. I couldn't, and something had to change. Moments after my non-fatal attempt on my life, I was sitting with my dog and I was crying, and not the good crying, the sort of crying where there's the tears and the snot are mixing together and I'm sort of wailing. But one thing that was very clear in that moment was a big truth that I didn't want to die. At no point did I want to die. What I wanted was, I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted to achieve things. I wanted to do an Ironman. I wanted to go to uni. And one day I wanted to be a dad, and I wanted to live a life that had independence. So I was given a gift of more time. And it's a gift that on average, 8 to 9 people a day in this country aren't given. It's a gift that 8 to 9 people a day in this life aren't given, and we don't get to hear the stories, and we don't get to see the inventions and the paintings that these people would have had for the world. So what happened for me at that point is that something did have to change, and I needed to look at my puzzle. As broken and shattered as it was, and pieces all over the place, I looked at it as though I was given a gift to start again. And that was a pretty scary thing. So how do we build our picture of who we are when we lose those valuable pieces, or we get extra pieces put in? Remember all those conversations I mentioned before that I've had? Well, I can tell you that I've heard at least 517 different ways to put a puzzle back together. And I can tell you that for most of us, it's pretty scary. It's a really scary thought to start to rebuild. And it's sometimes an even scarier thought to let go of the current picture that we've worked hard to build. Now, I really love to describe this by Tarzan. Now, when Tarzan grabs onto a vine and swings forward, he's got to let go of the one behind him. Otherwise, he gets stuck in the middle. And for some of us, when we're trying to move on and create new pictures in our mind, we get stuck. And that's okay. It's okay, because we all go through that. So when I was in the early period of rebuilding my puzzle and putting it back together, I set a goal for myself to do an Ironman triathlon. And we've recently had the Cairns Ironman in Cairns. And I don't know, most of you probably have some sort of concept about what that involves to get to it. It's quite a rigorous task on your body. But what many people don't know is that a lot of the people who do Ironman, they do it as a way to figure things out about themselves. They do it as a way to kind of reset. And for me, it was about setting a new definition for recovery. I wanted to redefine it and say, this is my version of recovery. It was about me creating a new narrative of who I am. It was also about letting go of the old narrative and putting the old nature to rest and cleansing my mind. Like, I still remember the first time that I rode a bike after my accident, and when I went about 12 kilometers an hour, the world sort of turned into like a big blur. Now, you don't need to have had brain damage to experience the world being a blur. The last couple of years with COVID and all the changes and all the things that have gone on, I'm sure for many people, the world has felt super blurry. And some of the most blurry stuff in my life has actually been since the accident and since I've recovered, when I've had my life together, or I've felt my life was together. But the road to the first Ironman that I completed, it was really cool and challenging. But what it also did is I learnt the steps that I need to take to create the picture of who I am that was defined by me, and it wasn't defined by medical experts. It wasn't defined by loving friends and family who wanted to wrap me up and keep me safe and not allow me to be disappointed by failing at things in life. What I learned is that Ironman showed me that I can't ignore things that happen in my life. I can't ignore my beliefs and my desires, and I can't run from things around me. What I learned to do is to start to run with them and ride and swim with them, more so ride and run. I don't particularly like swimming, but what I started to also do is to make room in my life for emotions, to sit with them and think, why am I feeling this emotion? Why am I having this thought? And be curious about it, not push it away. And what that showed me is it learned me how to accept my reality. We all are made up of many different realities, and sometimes we only like to have the reality that we have when we go on holidays, and then it's back to this reality. But they're all realities, and they're all feedback on what's happening in our life. The many conversations that I've shared with people over the last 10 years have shown me a few things about people's character, and they've shown me a few things that are important to put our puzzles back together and create those new narratives for us. One is around emotional agility. And I mentioned just before about sitting with my emotions and sitting with my feelings. There's so much negativity around people being sad and around people being angry, and everyone just wants to feel good and be happy and feel joy. There's no future in that. It's great to experience those things, but it's also great to experience anger and sadness. They make us feel real, and they give us feedback on what's happening in our life. They show us what's important in life. I've also learned that being vulnerable, it isn't a weakness. Being vulnerable is a superpower. Some of the most amazing people I've met in my life have been the most vulnerable people who are okay to say, you know what, today's been a crappy day and I need some help. Or, you know what, last week sucked, but this week's going okay. It showed me that hard doesn't mean the end. It showed me that when we have crushing moments, it doesn't have to crush us. When I did the first puzzle with my son some years ago, we started with a puzzle that was a giraffe, and it was 5 pieces. And we put it back together. But over time, he learned how to do it himself. And when it got a little bit easier, the puzzle got a little bit more complex. And as he's grown, the complexity has continued to grow along with him. So it hasn't really got to a place where they're easier. But one thing that we do know is that when the puzzles are new and we tip it out, at first it's like, oh, Dad, look at all those pieces. I'm never going to be able to do that. But what we do is we work it out. We work together. We confront the different shapes and the many options we have to put them together. But we know that at the end, there's only one way that we will fit it in with cohesion. We know that if we leave pieces out, the puzzle won't work. We know that if we grab pieces of a puzzle from an old picture or a different picture, it also won't work. It'll be incomplete or it'll overcomplicate it. Life's pretty similar, isn't it? Life follows the same process that my son and I are in terms of growing together with puzzles that start less complex. When we're born, things are pretty simple. We wake up and we get fed and we go back to sleep, and if we need to go to the toilet, we don't even have to really worry about that. But as life continues, we get jobs, we get friends, we get relationships, we get education, we lose jobs, we lose friends, we lose relationships. They're all pieces of our puzzle, and they're all parts of who we are. But just like it's scary to rebuild, just like it's scary when we tip out a really complex puzzle, the process is the same. The process for building and understanding who and what your picture looks like, it's very similar. If you've never put your puzzle together consciously, and you've never spent time to understand who you are, then it's going to be pretty scary for you. And I get that. And it's going to take a little bit of time to figure it out, but you don't have to do it alone. And you don't have to carry the thoughts around any longer. You don't need to believe the picture that others paint for you. I've had many conversations with people that are running from pictures in their mind that are of them from many years ago. They're pictures from when they were at school and they were a different way. And now they've got their life on and they've moved and they've changed and they've adopted really healthy behaviors, but still they're stuck to this picture of who they once were, and it wears them down. But what I want to call on is to become a society of people who are puzzle builders, not just for ourselves. It's great to build our puzzle, but be aware of our friends around us and our family. And when we notice that someone's puzzle has been blown apart, there's an opportunity for us to come together and connect with that person and help them to build their puzzle back together. As we make changes, when we make these sort of changes together, as a society, we can make a shift, and it can bring people hiding these thoughts and things out of the shadows and into the community. And as we help people to put their puzzles back together, we get to enjoy the gifts of those people which they can have around us. But there's another step in this. And to describe this, I want to share a story about one of the first times that I met my brother's wife. She's an English lady who's really fit, and we went out to a beautiful steak restaurant, and my brother and I were super excited for the steak. And as they brought over the steak menus, my brother's wife goes, "Hey, can I have the dessert menu?" And I looked at her, and the guy goes, "Oh, I'll bring them at the end." And she goes, "No, I want them now." So she ordered dessert before the steak came out, and I didn't say anything about it. And once we finished the steaks, which were pretty good, the waiter came back over and said, "Would you like to see the dessert menus?" And we all went, no, we've got no room for that. And I turned to my brother's wife and I said, "Why did you have dessert first?" She said, "I love dessert." She said, "I work really hard, but I love the desserts that this place has. If I didn't make room for them and I ate all that steak, I would be stuffing it in." Now, when I have conversations to people about things that have gone on in their life, and I say, "Hey, how do you prioritize self-care?" It's so often that people will go, "Tynan, I don't have room. I can't find room." And I'll always say to them, "You're so true. You will never find room, so stop looking." There's no clocks that have got 25 hours in them. There's no 8-day weeks. You will never find room. What you need to do is you need to be intentional. You need to make room in your life for you. And as we celebrate or we acknowledge Are You Okay Day, and it's about checking in with others, if we haven't made time in our lives to make room for ourselves, and we go and check in with other people and we want to ask them how they're going, if someone is not in an okay place, then we're going to set ourselves up to be quite vulnerable and quite open to taking on board what they've got. And then we'll go away and be overfilled ourselves. So make room in your life for yourselves. Now, I just want to cover quickly the Are You Okay Day steps and just clarify a few things around that. This strategy is a pretty good suicide prevention strategy, but I feel over the years that the whole concept about asking people, "Are you okay?" has become quite cliche, and people just want to give that automatic response. "Yeah, mate, good. Yeah, mate, good. No worries." Are You Okay Day is about human connection and the power of a conversation, the power of a conversation to change someone's life, and the power of a conversation to eventually change your own life if you've made room for yourself. So the reason you'd ask someone, "Are you okay?" or however you might do it, I typically prefer to ask people, "How's your world going? What's been happening for you?" And again, there's one of 714 different ways to ask that question. But you normally would ask it because you've noticed something. So you frame it up and ask them. Just say, "Hey, mate, look, I've noticed that you haven't attended this, or I've noticed you've started to do this behavior, or I've noticed that this life event has happened. I just want to check how that is for you." And if someone just gives you the old shrug off, "Yeah, I'm fine, mate," but you don't believe that, follow up and ask them again. And if you get to a place where someone just keeps palming you off and you truly believe it, give it a day or give it a two, come back, revisit, and ask the question again. Ask them. And if you ask the question and they say, "Okay, look, I'm not okay," you don't have to fix their problems. At no point do you need to fix it. If they say they're not okay, listen. Just turn on your ears and listen to them. Find out what's been happening. What's it like for you? How have you been managing this? And if you get to this point where you're really worried about someone, and I'm talking about the suicide question, there's no way of beating around the bush. And this can be a really, really hard thing for people to do. But by asking the question, "Hey, look, I've noticed that something's been going on with your life. Look, I've been really worried. I just want to check. Have you been having thoughts of suicide?" By asking that question of someone, if they've been thinking about it, you're not going to increase the likelihood of that happening. You're going to decrease it. For many people, they have a lock around that thought where they are so ashamed to have that thought. And by you freeing them and allowing them to say, "Yeah, you know what, I have been." What an amazing gift you give someone, to love someone and care for someone so much that you want to ask them that question. Again, if they say yes, you don't need to fix it. Thank them and say, look, thank you for your honesty. I just want to check, have you got any plans around that? If they say yes, then stay with that person, connect them with Lifeline or with a doctor or someone else, but just connect them with people. I volunteer at Lifeline, and we quite often connect with people having these very conversations, and we'll check with that person and we'll set up a safety plan and keep them safe or make the appropriate action. It's not your job. You're just there to check in with that person. If you get to the point and you've asked someone, are they okay? And they say no, there's no suicide on it, listen to that person. Give them space. Give them space without wanting to fix their problems. All too often, and the men on here, I'm going to single us out because we're the ultimate problem fixers, particularly with our partners when they come home and they just want to tell us about their day and we go, you just need to do this. Don't do that. Just listen. Give people the time, allow them to verbalize what's going on, and encourage them. What have you tried around this? What steps have you done? How has that worked? Do we need to get someone else around this? And just work with them to work out what's the next step going to be when we finish this conversation. And the last part of it is about being a good bloke or a good lady and checking with people. If you've asked someone how they're going and you've checked in, but things are wrong with them and they've basically told you what's going on and been vulnerable, don't just leave that person and never contact them again. Give them a call that day, send them a text, or maybe next day, and just follow up and say, hey, it was really great to have that conversation, and I just wanted to check where you're at with things and see if there's any more that I can do to support you. So in short, that's kind of my message today, and I'm open for questions if anyone wants to pop them in the chat or come off mute. But look, in short, make room in your life for yourself and look at your puzzle and look at the pieces that are there and really work to create that picture of who you are that is okay for you. And the picture is defined by you, not by other people. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Tynan. That was amazing. Incredible story. And the analogy about the puzzle will always, I could really relate to it. Also the dessert before mains, that also relate to that as well. Thank you, COVID. Just opening it up to everyone online, and I know we've got quite a few people who are in person in some of our sites. Feel free to come off mute or video if you do have any questions for Tynan. While people think about questions, I do have a few. Tynan, on your recovery journey, were there any consistent support people or groups around you for that time?
That's a great question, and quite often I talk about my mate Simo. Now, my mate Simo was the mate that would come around to my house basically all the time, and I was sleeping 18 to 20 hours a day. Simo would come in, he'd sit down, I wouldn't say hello to him, I'd go sleep for 6 hours, wake up, he'd still be there, and he'd just tell me about going surfing, chasing girls, getting drunk, just doing stupid stuff. And I never really appreciated the power of Simo in my life and the power of being with someone when you don't have anything to say and you don't need to say anything, but just being there and showing someone, hey, I don't have the right words to say, but I just want to show you that I'm here and show up. And that, to me, it wasn't until I sort of reflected many years later the impact that Simo had on my life. And I've told him many, many times before, I've said, Simo, hey, I'm speaking today and I'm going to talk about my mate Simo, but it really does reinforce the benefit of that human connection. And I ask everyone on there to be a Simo to someone, or find that Simo in your life. But that was really, really the most powerful part. And my mum bought me a dog about 6 months into my recovery who became my best friend. So
that's awesome. And when is your next triathlon?
I'm in Busselton in 4th of December.
Nice.
Yeah.
That in itself, that's sort of a what I know of, not many, but that's also an isolating sport to take on. So again, you're sort of rely on the support, but it's all about you getting up in the morning to do the training.
It is. It's the honesty that I love about it, and it's such a good analogy for life as well, that if I turn up to a race and I haven't prepared, that's on me. And same as when I'm out training. I mean, at many times I can just stop and I can hop off the bike or I can stop running and the pain stops. But it's not what I want to do, because what I want to do is get to a goal where I can finish a race and I can do a certain time. So you just keep pushing, and you get a little bit comfortable being uncomfortable, if that's possibly makes any sense. But look, one of the other things that I think is kind of important to cover in these messages is, now that I think about it, and I probably should have written it down, is some of the myths that exist around these topics. So I sort of covered it before, that by asking the question about suicide, that it doesn't increase the risk. And that is fact, that by asking the question, it actually reduces the risk of that happening. There's a lot of other ones that exist around it too. And that's the big one, which I've sort of faced myself, is around mental illness. And everyone who is suicidal does so because they've got a mental illness. Less than 50% of the people who die by suicide or have non-fatal attempts on their life have no mental illness. And in many cases, it's more so a reflection on life and our ability to cope and respond to traumatic events and things that happen. But it's those cascading events in life that happen where you might, I always love the story when we talk about preventable suicides. Like, you could be driving to work and you crash your car, you're late to work, so you lose your job, you come home and your girlfriend leaves you. And there are events that if it was one of them, you'd be able to respond, but a cascade of things lead people to a place where they get scared and their ability to cope and respond is thrown out the window. So yeah, that's not true. And also, that's one of the things that holds a lot of people back from actually reaching out, is that fear of, how am I going to be perceived? Am I going to be locked up in a ward, or what's going to happen to me? But it's about starting a conversation, and places like Lifeline or the suicide callback line, it's an avenue just to start a conversation and really open that door and open the dialogue to the possibilities about what's the next step for me. And once you verbalize what's going on in your world, it also allows you to think outside of the picture. It's quite often that when you're in a place, like for me, when I had thoughts of suicide, it was literally like this. Like, I'd walk around and have conversations, but I couldn't see anything. And all I could see was literally that thought in front of me. And once I sort of started to address that and make some changes, the blinkers came off, and all of a sudden I could see the world around me again, and I could see the people that were there, and I could see my mate Simo and have a conversation and go, there are people here, there are solutions, there is ways forward. And yeah, it's so powerful to do that. And I also love the whole thing about like asking the question. I've been asked it a number of times in my life, and at first I was kind of like, stigma, like once I've had thoughts of suicide, I'll always be suicidal, which isn't the case. But I kind of like was a bit offended at first, but then on reflection, I went, what an amazing thing to have people around me who love me and care for me that much, and have spent the time to notice that things have happened in my world. And here they are saying, hey, I just want to ask you the question, like, have you been thinking about that? And it's on the reflection that I think what a amazing thing for people to do.
Tynan, I've just got some few questions coming through the chat line. One is from Karen Reed. How would you describe the place you're in now?
Now, I am in a place right now where self-care for me is paramount, and I work full-time in suicide prevention, and we're an organisation that is built on people with lived experience. So one of the things that I do is self-care, and I have a self-care plan, and I do emotional agility all the time. So I'll allocate time in my week to sit down or go for a hike, and I'll just go, is there anything I'm upset about? Is there anything I'm angry about? What am I happy about? And what that does is it allows me space to confront what's going on in my life and not push it away, but actually go, okay, this is feedback from events that have happened. What can I do about impacting on that? And what that does for me is it creates opportunities for me to basically be proactive and preventative towards things cascading. I mean, I went through 4 years of family court in recent years, and I literally had a team of people around me that I said, okay, if this happens, call me. If this happens, call me. But in terms of like, do I live with thoughts of suicide now? I haven't had thoughts of suicide for a very long time. And I'm very comfortable to talk about it. And I think part of that is that we find that once people have a lived experience of suicide, part of the way for people forward is they want to do something in the space and they want to help others. And I went down the route of becoming a social worker and a counsellor, and I do Lifeline, and now I'm sort of leading a national project with Roses in the Ocean. And they're all things that fill my cup up. And I quite often get told when I go and speak at events, they're like, how can you be so enthusiastic talking about suicide? And I go, well, I don't need to be like, I don't need to not be excited about it. Like, I've been there. I know what it's like. I work with people with lived experience, and I'm going to come at it with my passion. I'm going to come at it with my enthusiasm, and I'm going to knock down doors, and I'm going to break barriers, and I'm going to help people get that chance of time.
Essentially,
sorry if that didn't answer the question.
Well, sometimes people see you as a survivor, right? So that's why they sort of these stories they're real stories, Tynan. So we really appreciate. I do have time, just one more question. What is the key strategy to counter the negative impact of people trying to drag you down rather than lift you up?
This is
and all
hard.
those points of contact that you have had that you mentioned at the start.
Yeah, this is really hard, and it's probably one of the hardest things for people to do. And what I mean by that is, I sort of spoke about, we have these pictures of who we are, often built on the past. And the best example I can have is when people go through school, they have this facade of who they are. And sometimes if people are the bully or people are the class clown, they carry that through life. And I've got a really good mate. Like, I honestly don't remember anything before I was 19. So I don't remember any about school. But I've got a really good friend who I know that he used to be a class clown, and now he like runs businesses, but people still have this perception of him. And through conversations that I had with him is that it would bring him down and it would prevent him from getting to the next level. And I said, you need to prioritize you, make room in your life, and work out what is it that is holding you back. And it was these people in his life. And in many cases, it means having a conversation with people and saying, hey, you know what? That impacts me. And if you don't want to get on board and support me, then I'm sorry, but we're going to distance ourselves. And my friendships change over time, and I have amazing conversations now with people. And the friendships I do have are with people who are vulnerable, with people who are authentic, and with people who are going to help me grow and help me to be the best version of myself and achieve things. And likewise, I will help those people around me. And I don't know, when I connect with people, I say, the more we hang out, my vision and my goal is to get you to a place where you truly believe in yourself. And it's hard. And sometimes like those conversations and those people that we need to remove ourselves and distance from are family. And yeah, that can be really hard for people to accept that. And I've got family members that I'm happy to see a couple of times a year. And if they're ever in trouble or ever, I'm happy to take the call. But I know that for my own well-being and my own health, that I need to keep that distance and have those boundaries in place.
Thank you again so much. And also, while everyone's on the phone, obviously self-care today is very important. Definitely, I'm one that is bereaved by suicide from a family member, and I really use gratitude diary a lot to keep that positive mojo going, I guess, and really reflecting on each day with 3 nice gratitude points. I recommend that for anyone who hasn't done that before. Tynan, any closing comments before we give these lovely people some time back?
I would ask everyone to pick up the phone today and just send a text to someone, the first person that comes to your mind, and just say, hey, I love you. That's it. You don't need any more context than that. And set yourself a reminder. I quite often start up with, like, I'm quite a spiritual person, but I'll pray and just say, hey, put someone on my mind today. And I'll do that at least once or twice a week. And quite often you'll pick up the phone and have a conversation, or you send someone a text. And later down the line, you never know, but I've had many encounters where I've picked up the phone and called someone, and sometime in life, like a bit down the line, they've said, hey, that really helped me. I was really struggling that day. And you never know the power of human connection. So yeah, be that Simo in your friends' lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for your support today. Keep the conversation going. And Tynan, I'm sure we'll connect with you again in the future.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Bye.